is our special edition on the 64th anniversary of Nigeria as a nation. This broadcast has been on for a while with our colleagues, now handing over the baton to us, where we'll be dissecting all the very important aspects of this special day celebration. I'm Sunday Micheal Ogu, and it's a pleasure, as always, to be with you this morning.
I am Lilian Ogazi. It's good to have you here with us this morning. And yes, Nigeria is 64. Well, let's quickly banter a bit. Now, I did a report yesterday, and I realized that over the years, independence keeps getting quiet, and a lot more quiet. People are not celebrating as much as they used to. People are not out in the streets, you know, holding the flag and happy, because do they really have what to celebrate on Independence Day?
With a deeper introspection, there are indeed many things to celebrate. The fact that we continue to remain one indivisible nation with all our struggle, I think, is a reason to celebrate. But I agree with you, as you grow older and responsibilities increase, celebrating independence will be the least of your worries. If you are anybody in my category who is just coming out from school fees payment and is looking up to house rent payments, you want to indeed categorize what to celebrate and what not to. That is the Nigerian situation. That's the situation of just about everyone you meet, except if you are in that bracket where everything about your life is subsidized by the virtue of your being in government. But that will be a conversation for another time. We have joining us in the studio at this time to continue to dissect various aspects of the issues we'll be looking at this morning. To my immediate right, it's a woman whose face is everywhere. If you follow the socio-political issues in Nigeria. I was telling her that, there's a popular newspaper segment that is called Around and About. Perfectly describe what she has done around the media using the various platforms that she has had to represent over the years. I have the pleasure to introduce to you the delectable Nwadishi Faith, the Executive Director of the Center for Transparency Advocacy. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, Nigerians, and happy independence.
Interesting. And I like the touch of green in your clothing. Somebody told me I'm not being patriotic because they can't find green in my outfit this morning, but that's okay. That's okay. We also have in the studio with us a face that I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. Recently, he stepped aside to try his hands on several other things to vitalize some of the latent talents within him that probably working in this space may have conscripted for a while. Talking about the immediate past deputy editor-in-chief and chairman of the Daily Trust editorial board, who is now the managing director and chief executive officer of Pyramid Political Insight. He's a political consultant in a nutshell, and I'm talking about Dr. Suleiman.
Thank you for having me, Sunday.
It's a pleasure to always be here.
Thank you.
Once a boss, they say, always a boss. But before we delve into what we have lined up for you, we would like to take some of the sound bites of the President's address on the 64th anniversary of our independence, and that will set the tone for our conversation this morning. Please stay with us.
Please be assured that we are implementing many measures to reduce the cost of living at home. I commend the governors, particularly in Kebbi, Niger, Jigawa, Kwara, Nasarawa, and other Southwest governors that have embraced our agricultural production program. I urge other states to join the federal government in investing in mechanized farming. We are playing our part by supplying fertilizer and making tractors and other farm equipment available. Last week, the Federal Executive Council approved establishing a local assembly plant for 2,000 John Deere tractors, combine harvesters, disc riders, bottom plows, and other farm equipment. The plant has a completion time of 6 months.
All right, thank you for staying with us. That was a part of the president's speech this morning. But let's go straight into our conversation. I'll start with Faith Nwadishi. Thank you for joining us once more.
Thank you.
What's your take on the president's speech so far? He addressed the nation this morning, and Nigerians had high expectation. Some did, some didn't. But overall, people always look forward to the president's speech. So what's your thought on, his speech this morning? Do you think it made any difference to Nigerians?
Thank you so much for having me on your platform, and the conversations you had earlier about the school fees and the rents and all of that. In fact, everybody is increasing. The school fees is increased. The landlords have written letters for increment of rents, and so being in that kind of condition, and you're looking forward to the presidential speech to uplift your spirit, give you some hope, and say that, well, we're 64 years, we're going on, this is a new year for us, what is it that we're going to look at? And then you just sit down and you hear like an update, like, okay, this is what is happening, there's nothing to look forward to. For instance, I work in the extractive industry, the sector, that's where I do my advocacy, and I hear the president talk about the ExxonMobil Seplat divestment and says that the executive council is going to approve that soon, and we have not heard that they have addressed the issues that we've been saying should be addressed. For instance, issues around decommissioning, issues around environmental remediations, and the people around the community. Why is it that ExxonMobil is running away from the land and going further to deep sea and all of that? We have not seen that. And just yesterday we had again that the World Bank has given another loan to the government, and how are we going to pay back? It's not a grant, it's a loan. And you see that the president is also talking about the issue of insecurity and not really telling us what is the strategy, what is it that we hold on to. Rather, you're telling us that you're giving us the body counts, the number of persons. We're not happy that people are dying. We just want to ensure that our borders are safe, people are safe, they can go to sleep. Even right now, we can't even sleep with one eye open. You have to keep your two eyes open. We didn't see that come out, And then again, the idea for a youth conference that is coming up, and when we have not really looked at ourselves and told ourselves the truth, what is the issue? Is the issue really about the youth? I know that it is important that we should look at the youth. When you work in population sector, because I did some work in the population in the past, they call your population a youth population when you have a youth bulge. And that's what we are in Nigeria. I understand that we should address that, but there's nothing on ground to talk about incentives, giving people the hope, to look up to something is going to happen in a few years' time. It's just the same story, it's just flat. and I guess, the most worrisome for me, even though youth were mentioned, is that nothing was mentioned about the woman, the women in Nigeria, the pain that they have to bear in this biting economy, taking care of the home, looking at career, and ensuring that things are held in place. There's really nothing for me. I actually feel like crying right now, truly, because listening I was quite emotional.
Let's not get the tears rolling just yet. But let me get to you now, Mrs. Suleiman. Do you agree with what she just said in terms of even when it comes to youth? And did the message come out just flat to you, or you felt like there should have been more to it?
Well, for me, I think my problem with the president's speech is not what he said, but is in the things that he didn't say. For example, this is Independence Day. It's not a campaign day. It's not a day for APC or a day for even government. It's a day for Nigeria, separate from the government of the day. So what I would have expected is a reflection on Nigeria as a whole, from the beginning to the present point. Where are we? Where are we going to address some of the big questions in the country? Not to talk about the specific things that the government is doing. I wish, the president and his team had understood that on a day like this, it's not about selling your government necessarily, but about inviting Nigerians to join you to reflect on the country, the politics, the economy, the society, the culture. All of these things, are we making progress? Are we getting better where we were now, where we were 15, 20 years ago? It's not about any specific government or specific individuals, but an opportunity to do some, what do they call it? Is it not taken, or retrospection, to look at the country, and look at ourselves as a people, right in the mirror and say, are we making progress? The primary school that you attended, the secondary school that you attended, is it still as good as when you attended it? Is it improving, or is it getting worse? These are the things I expected a president to talk about, rather than to be focused on what he and his government are doing, because that Nigerians know more than him. Because it's not about what he is doing, it's about how Nigerians are feeling what he is doing. And that, I can assure you, people are not really feeling good. So for me, I think we should, this is why some people are talking about having a State of the Union address. If we have a State of the Union address, then the president will have an opportunity to come and tell Nigerians and give account of his stewardship over the past year. But on a day like our independence, the young people who will, come out to the primary schools or go out to the marches, what they want to hear about Nigeria is where we were before, where we are now, where we hope to be going in the near future, not just what the government is doing, youth conference. I don't even know what conference can do for youths, because you have the instrumentality of policy. Conference is a talk show, just like we're having now. It doesn't necessarily translate into policy. It's the quality of your policies about youths, about the economy, about everything else that we should be talking about. I don't say that don't do youth conference, but conferences are just opportunities for people to talk. It's not that they are bad, but it's the policy. What is the policy that you have for youth, or a set of policies for you? Thank you.
All right, Doctor, I'm still staying with you, and this question is premised on the fact that I know, just like the president, that you have lived in other climes, and you know what Independence Day speeches are like, and you've given us that perspective from what you expected that speech to do. Now, my question really is psychoanalyzing that speech and even the disposition of this president before today. Do you think there isn't enough knowledge around what people want to hear, or it is just basically the government saying, let us tell them what we want to tell them? It doesn't matter how it come across, we just pass our message.
To be honest, thank you very much for raising that question. The president's communications have been poor throughout, from day one to this very moment. I don't know whether there is effort to improve it, or not, because communication, the way a leader speaks to the people, is part of government. Itself is an instrument of governing, because it helps to mobilize people. It helps, like Madam Faith was saying earlier, it gives people hope, But if a president is speaking and he has his eyes fixed somewhere, it doesn't really speak well.
Communicate the emotions.
What the communications team would have done is to sample the opinions of Nigerians. Take the president's previous clips. Take a sample of Nigerians from diverse backgrounds. Show them those clips. Are you happy with your president speaking like this? Take feedback and use that feedback to now improve the president's performance. Because like I said, speaking to people is part of governing, is part of leadership. You had seen previous videos that we have seen today of Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, of Gawan, of Ashagari, speaking to Nigerians. So when you were talking about people not, Linda Amin, talking about people not showing as much interest in, again, it's part of the drab speeches that Nigerians get from their presidents on Independence Day. Before, as a primary school kid, you want to hear IBB speaking, because you are sure he's going to dazzle you, he's going to say something significant, he's going to speak with energy, with vigor, Shagari, and so on and so forth. But I don't know, these days, you just see people speaking. You don't even know what they're saying or what they are saying. And it's important.
It is.
Because it's part of preparation for the job, and so on. Thank you.
All right. Now let me get to Madam Faith now. Something we're talking about today is the role of activism. and role of activism and social fights in Nigeria. Over the years, we've seen so many activists come out to speak and clamor for what they expect the government to do. Now, would you say that, given the speech the president has given, and then we had the last protest that happened, and the planned October protest, would you say activism is making any wave in Nigeria one way or another? Are they getting the necessary response they need from the government?
Okay, so in the past, you would say that activism has helped to shape a lot of the policies and with the way things are done in the country. I was a student union activist from my days, and I went on in fact, I was at the time voted the deputy registrar of the student senate in school then, and I went on to become a member of the Women in Nigeria. The Women in Nigeria was one of the groups that helped to form with the CLO and other organizations. Then I actually rose to be the national secretary of the Women in Nigeria group, and so that formed a lot of the things that I did from a very young age and growing up and up till now. So, but unfortunately, what you now see is that you still have very good activists, people who are speaking, but I have been disappointed once or twice seeing that some of those people you look up to as mentors, as soon as they get the opportunity to get into office, is a different language altogether. There is a particular mentor I had when I was growing up, and then he espoused this whole idea of a failed state that is not able to provide for the welfare of the people. That particular activist, right now, I wouldn't want to mention his name, is actually in the House of Representatives. When he started running for election and from one of the southern states, and we're able to ask, what has happened to the theory of the failed state where government, you say, if you're on the other side, you don't understand clearly what is happening. So when you get in here, you get to understand how things are going on. So this is one of the disappointments we have found. But some people have held on and they've continued. And if we didn't have activism in this country, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know what would have happened from 1993. In 1993, I was a youth copper. I was in Lagos, and I had to relocate back to my place. We were part of that struggle. At the time, just before the 1993 election, we had the SAP, the IBB must go structural adjustment program. So we're on the streets protesting. They came looking for me to arrest me. They arrested my younger brother. Unfortunately, my younger brother died 2 years ago. They were just about uplifting them from Benin to Abuja when he was eventually released. They broke his arm, and he had that broken arm until he passed 2 years ago. So these are the things. And then there was the time the Abacha must stay, the 2 million man march. And I met one of the projectors of that in Benin then. I was in Benin then. And I think it was the day that Abiola had died, or just a day before. And I was just coming from one of the communities, and he told me, he says, if government decides anything, government is second to God. But I grew up from those days knowing that you have to speak up. If you don't speak up, things will really go bad. And truly, activists have helped a lot in this country. It may not be seen, the fruits of that may not be very visible, but you can see that people have continued to stay true to these struggles, and things have happened. So take, for instance, the constitution that we have. It has increasingly been improved. The fact that you now have a Human Rights Commission, all of those came because of the struggles of the people. The Petroleum Industry Act that the president mentioned today took 21 years, consistency for that to happen. Some of the reforms that you see in the police, within the sector, the justice system, is because of the activism and what people hold through. So if we didn't have people who were speaking through to power, then everything would have collapsed by now. So it's really important. And then we also need to highlight the role that women played. I was watching earlier about Women's Riot, Margaret Ekpo, Hajias, and all the women and the contributions they have made to this democracy. And that's why the whole idea about the inclusion of women must continue, because we cannot have it as a whole if we're not bringing all of the voices. The way it affects me may be different from the way it affects you, but you see, it affects the woman differently, and that activism, the woman's activism, must be kept at the center, because it is about the whole of everything that happens. So I'll just rest on this and say that the young people that we have, they need to go back to history and learn of the role that activists had played. It's not about tribe. It wasn't really about tribe. It wasn't really about, oh, this is putting food. It wasn't really about that. We could travel to the north. I had the opportunity of traveling the length and breadth of this country because of those activism programs and things we had to do. Speaking truth to power, going into meetings, staying 12 hours in a meeting and talking about the state of the nation. We no longer have that. So we need to have these young people, grow, understanding that it is not just because I want to hold on to power, but you can actually stay out of power and be able to influence what is happening around power.
All right, thank you very much, Nwadishi. Listening to you and how you find this intelligent way of bringing the issues of the woman into your conversation is one thing that interests me a great deal. And maybe what's happening to us, Doctor, is some kind of fatigue, because if you've had people who have been at the forefront of this struggle since '93, that's 31 years of putting energy and resource into these things. Maybe what we have not done is to breed the next generation that would then bring life and vitality into that push, and maybe dimension them with their skills in IT and all of that. But what do you think has happened, especially in the face of the fact that we now even have people in power who are a product of activism themselves, who should understand the place of activism? And in all of this, for me, it is basically understand the place of feedback. But we now treat feedback like political opponents is the enemy speaking to you, even when there are data there that suggest clearly that they are speaking to facts. Why have we developed into a country that is intolerant of divergent ideas?
Thank you very much. I think that's a structural explanation for that. And I want to thank Madam Faith for all your activism and to assure you that it has not come to naught. That sometimes the history of nations is not straightforward line. There is, back and forth, and it is possible that a whole new generation of Nigerians can come and pick up from where you have left off or where you have reached so far and still push on. First of all, I want to maybe if we can take a look at just behind Lilian there. The three gentlemen there, Balewa, Azikiwe, and Awo, all of them started their careers as activists. Nigeria is a country born of activism, throughout. But the structural dimension is that this activism at the time used to have certain institutional framework that was wholly local, that was wholly independent. It was from the media, from the universities, either from among the teachers or the students, like she was, in 1993, or from the labor unions, or from the market women, or farmers, and so on. But all of these were Nigerian-based, Nigerian-led in any way. The funding was Nigerian, the ideas were Nigerian, particularly the ideas. Because it is ideas that drive political processes. We always ignore that, and that's important. Unfortunately, the sort of activism we have tended to have...
Without cutting you,
yes,
just to let our viewers know that we are getting live feeds from Lagos to suggest that the protesters have kept true to their words. They are on the street. The footages on our screen there, shows Showore leading some of the protesters, if my memory serves me, like somewhere around Ojota. There in Lagos. We'll continue to keep track of developments around the country, and we'll bring you this live feed as soon and as early as we can get them. And we just to say that we have reporters deployed. Sagir is also scanning the streets of Abuja. Once we get anything concrete, we would advise our viewers that's to help you also plan your day and absorb as much as possible the developments around the country at this time. Doctor, sorry for cutting your short.
No,
you may
that's
finish.
fine.
Yeah.
So it was entirely local. It was Nigerian-led, Nigerian-funded, Nigerian idea. What has happened since the so-called advent of democracy is that a lot of our civil society organizations, and I'm part of this space, myself, the ideas and the funding and the thinking, they're generally driven from outwards, rather than growing up inwards. It does not apply to all categories, but in most cases, or in quite a good number, you find that the thinking is outwards, rather than inwards, because people feel the need to demonstrate something in either to report to somebody else from somewhere. I think that's really not good, and I have advised that if Nigerian government, they knew how to really manage people, manage public statecraft, they can put aside lots of money, funding for local civil society organizations to be able to access and use people like Madam Faith to impartially and impersonally administer such funds, so that if you have an idea of even protest or whatever, you can get funding from it, so that the ideas will become local again. The initiatives will become local and Nigerian again. Are you following the point I'm making? Because right now, people are doing this because they want to demonstrate to somebody else from somewhere. They want to impress somebody somewhere, to criticize government and so on and so forth. It's not that government criticism is bad also, but if you look at the ones we had before, the NLC, the Nigeria Labour Congress, the Margaret Ebo that you are talking about, these are people, the About Women riots. They put up their own monies, their own bodies, because they believed in this, because they thought that this is what will drive Nigeria forward. Nowadays, it is largely somebody somewhere, who decides the agenda, and not just decides the agenda, but even construct the strategies. Are you following? About how we should engage our own governments. And then they sell the agenda to us here and then fund it, and then people say they're. So that's one problem. The other problem is that sometimes, because it's also not locally driven, the idea of internal strategy is lost. For example, the last protest that you were talking about, I was very happy when people were talking about the protests, because I thought that the government had somehow, because I don't believe all this quarrel between NLC and the federal government, I don't think so. I just believe that somehow the labor movement in its current form had sold Nigerians out. Why do I think that? Because the day that the federal government said that subsidy is gone, and people started selling fuel 500 naira, 800 naira, 700, that was the day that labor needed to mobilize Nigerians and go and responded, because that had always been the tradition. They will respond swiftly and immediately and get Nigerians on the streets and at least get the something to reduce. But they didn't. They say, we will go on strike next 2 weeks. We will have a meeting next month, and so on. Until government got the upper hand, and then the government now began to show them their other side of itself now, and then it now looked uncomfortable. So I thought that if the strategists of the protest had not said end bad governance, maybe it would have been more effective. The political science research on protests is very clear. Protests are likely to succeed if they are focused on one or two issues that are clearly defined. If you say bad governance, what is bad governance? How do you operationalize bad governance? Bad governance is also speaking bad, like we said about the president's speech now. You can say that too is part of bad governance. But if you say reduce fuel, or food or something, or increase salary, something specific, you are likely to succeed. So I think that also is part of the problem. Again, because people just see others doing it somewhere and then they thought that it could then easily be replicated. It takes intellectual engagement, which has been largely missing in recent years.
I'll stay on you. I like the fact that you made mention of the fact it takes intellectual engagement, and it's probably something done out of wanting the public eye or somebody outside somewhere else to see it. Which brings me to what she said. I'll get back to you, Madam Faith. But she spoke about ulterior motives, seeing that people who are part of activism are now in government. It's more like these people you're protesting against, you have now come to join them. Now, would you say most of these protests and activism we see are obviously for ulterior motives? And I always come out to say it's not just the political leaders that are corrupt. These people come from the society and they go up there. They see the struggles in society and they get up there and they ignore it and still act like what you've been protesting about in the first place. So would you say that the corrupt nature of Nigerians generally and the ulterior motive is what is driving, the government being unresponsive when people come out to the street to protest or, carry out activism? And even Nigerians don't even trust the activists at this point in time. So what's your thought on the ulterior motives and the attitude of the government towards, activism and activists?
Thank you very much. Nigerians do not have a corrupt nature separate from people elsewhere. All humans have a tendency to abuse power if they can get away with it. The reason why you cannot do it in some places and can do it in others is simply because the institutional framework would not make it possible. And it goes back to the structural changes that I was talking about earlier. The activism of the old, she mentioned CLO. That was a fantastic organization in Nigerian history. You can say that the struggle for democracy was largely, as far as citizen-led fight was concerned, CLO played an important role in it. But if you look at the structural organization of the CLO, it was quite democratic itself because it was not one single organization. It comprised nearly all organizations in the country wherever they were. The unfortunate thing is that they were fighting for democracy, but there was no agenda about what happened when we get on the morning after when we do get a democracy. So they left the space for politicians and things. It wasn't necessarily bad as such, but if you look at ASU, for example, it has an institutional framework that drives their activism. So if somebody comes from an ASU background, he has a name to live up to. He has a reputation to live up to. That weight is on their shoulder. So it might not necessarily stop them from doing what they want to do, but it can serve as a kind of wage against, being. And if you look at so many people that have come out of ASU have served in government relatively honestly, let me say. But if somebody coming from ASU is different from someone coming from the university. Let me make that clear. So those that have come out of also NLC, those that have come out of the press as they used to be, because these ones used to have some influence on government as well as on the society. So that structural influence that organizations had is no longer there. It's no longer that rooted. So now people say, okay, I have an NGO, Center for Media Policy and Accountability, just out of the blue. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not rooted in any historical movement within the country. So there isn't any. So I can dazzle, and then tomorrow I find myself in government, and then there is nothing to really live up to. So if our movements, our activist movements, were like those movements of the old, these ones were rooted in society, including, of course, I was reading a story about the Igbo Union in Kano, recently, a whole booklet. Because of these kinds of institutions, if you were a member of the Igbo Union in Kano or anywhere in Nigeria, what that meant is you couldn't misbehave anyhow. You couldn't just start misbehaving because people are already identified you and identify you with the reputation of the Igbo Union. Yeah. Whatever you do in the government will affect the union directly. So there was that institutional framework within which people worked as activists. Yeah. Now those institutional frameworks are largely, externally driven. or certainly not as locally driven as they should be.
Sure.
That's
All right.
my opinion on that.
Just taking off on the back of some of these issues that have been raised by Dr. Suleiman, especially the issue of funding. You hear the government most times in response to the civil society say, these are just the machination of foreign governments who want to divide us. They are doing the bidding of people who wants to make sure that this democracy, as led by us, does not say. You get all those kind of questions, those kind of comments that question the very core and credibility of some of the movements of this civil society space. When you get those responses, what does that do to you? And knowing fully well that some of these movements are foreign funded, how does that impact on the effectiveness of your strategy and messaging? That's one part of it. The other part I would like you to respond to also is the fact that, like we said, it appears that every time there is a need to push for something, we continue to see the same faces. It is you, it is the Femi Falanas of those who are speaking. It is there seems to be some kind of fatigue, even in terms of inspiring people to be part of a movement, and they've come to brand that space as you hear people in the streets of Lagos who just saying they just want to use us. We'll go out there, once they invite them for a meeting and they negotiate, this whole thing dies off. But there is another force in the social media space where people who are dissatisfied sort of express themselves freely. We have not provided leadership in that space. We have not provided coordination in that space. And I'm thinking, is there something we can do, to harness that force? Because we have seen the Senate President apologize to women on the back of the criticisms he received on the social media space. How can we harmonize that space that seemed ungoverned as it is right now, and harness that force into whatever we are doing with some of the few foot soldiers that we have in the civil society space?
Thank you so much. That's a loaded one. But let me, before I dive into the questions that you just raised, let me just go back to the issues around protests. So you see, one of the greatest protests we had in this country was 2012, the subsidy protest.
That's right.
I was in Delta State then. I was in the forefront of that. And then in 2016, something changed. In 2016, President Buhari came in and increased fuel. I flew all the way, paid my ticket and everything, came to Abuja for that protest. And people didn't turn out. People didn't want to be part of it. Just 4 years after, people didn't want to be part of it. Even Labour was divided on that protest. And I was like, what is this up? Why? And that was where we started getting it wrong. When people were called out, we walked to the Federal Secretariat. People were in their offices laughing at us. Those people are Labour members. Civil servants were laughing at us from their offices. We were there. We walked from the old parade ground to the Federal Secretariat. And they were laughing at us in 2016. And that was when I knew we had lost it. What is happening now is just what has started happening since 2016, but people didn't see it. So how do you expect the same people who were not part of the 2016 protest, because there was an increase, and you know that since that 2016, it has continuously increased. It has not come down. So this last time that the president said he was removing subsidy, as soon as he mentioned he was removing subsidy, Nigerians like you and I increased the pump price, even when they still had the old stock. So you see that when you situate the problem within governance, you also situate the problem with society and citizens themselves. So these are the issues we need to go back to the drawing table to talk about. So when you talk about strategy and issue of funding, some years ago, you could say that it was the funding partners who were directing that, but there was a pushback. Nigerians came out to say, no, it is our country, this is our strategy. Now you see that most strategies or most funding that come are looking at what is the government strategy. The same government that is saying civil society is collecting money is holding roundtables every day, pursuing funders for money to fund what is happening. And there was a time, because of this, there was a study that was done and found out that it is just 2% of funders' money that they're using for development. 98% of the money that we put in our budget don't achieve as much as the 2% of funders' money that they use for development. For instance, the European Union gives you money, go and put borehole in a place. You have to deliver that borehole. Perhaps that borehole is put at a budget of 2 million naira. The same budget for a borehole, the same capacity and all of that, the government will put for 20 million naira and is never delivered. It's never delivered. So you have, because you have this to say, this is what we have done with 2 million naira, and this is what you say you have done with 20 million, and we have not seen the report. So you see having this feedback about, oh, it is funders that are directing, it is funders that are doing that. Now there's that pushback to say, whatever thing you are funding, it has to link to the national policies. So for instance, you are doing access to information or issues around governance. You are looking at the implementation of the FOI that we have enacted for ourselves. We're looking at the PIA that we have enacted for ourselves. How are we implementing all of those? So by the time government sits down to say 98% of our budget should work for us and leave out, for instance, why do we need to go and take a $1.5 billion loan from the World Bank? And this is about the third loan we're taking from the World Bank. Why do we need to go to take that? If we put our resources together and ensure that the revenue that we get works for us. We have gas, we have crude oil, we have solid minerals, we have all of those things that can make us the number one nation of the world. But where is it going to? We don't have accountability on that. So when it comes to issues of strategy, I think that what we need to do, like the point you raised about the Igbo Union and all of that, we need to go back to our roots. I was privileged to be in a meeting of African elders in Malawi some years ago, and there was this policy that the European Union was bringing for Africa to sign. South Africa was already on the table signing that, and it was just about these issues around bribery and corruption. And I was telling them, I said, see, the biggest bribery cases we have had in Africa were from countries from the US to Europe.
Yes. When they
understand?
Business,
look at Siemens, look at Halliburton, all of those cases. Dangote is the richest African that they say, have we ever had such a bribery case with Dangote as at that time? And you're coming here you want African leaders to sign on to that. Because why are African leaders going on that table? Because of the aid that comes. That is for Nigeria, for instance. In some countries, that aid is significant for the development. But for Nigeria, it's less than 10%. It's less than 10% of what we budget, and yet we are not able to do that. So what we really need to do, like I said so many years ago, and I'm saying it, I keep saying it, is that we are Africans, we have values, we have culture. In those days, somebody steals from your community, steals from my community, is other ostracized. Nobody wants to associate with that person. But today, you become a politician and you steal. Even your traditional ruler will come to your gate and say, what do you have for me?
And give you a title.
And give you a title that you don't even deserve. True. You see, the kind of big name titles that they have now, we didn't have them those days. All you needed to do was to be a honest citizen of your community, promoting the values and the culture of your community. We are Nigerians, we are Africans, we have our values, we have our culture. We need to go back to those cultures. That doesn't, celebrate anybody that steals the Commonwealth or anything that will benefit everybody. And that's where the whole ideology of your brother's son is my son, or once you travel out of your village, you come to Abuja, you travel out, the person from your local government or even from your state becomes your brother or your sister.
Absolutely.
We had that. But what do we have now? People who think about themselves and themselves alone. You go around these cities, you see these old politicians, people who are even as military state heads, what were they called in the states? Governors and all of the ministry administrators. The wealth that they kept behind, their family can't even hold them. They're fighting and they're killing themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? So these are the things we are saying. We have left our values, and what we are promoting is not what is in our values. And so that's what the younger people are taking up. The younger people now believe that, hey, you heard them say education is a scam. You hear that? In those days, it wasn't that.
Somebody actually even returned his degree certificate.
Somebody tore it. Somebody tore his university certificate and said education is a scam. We weren't brought up like that. Every Independence Day, I call my children and I tell them, oh, when I was young, I will wear uniform, we will go out, we will do that. And they'll say, oh, mommy, what is happening? And I say, this is Nigeria that has happened to us. These things were things that built us, that helped us. You hear young people even on social media, and when something happens, they say, oh, let us thank our mothers or our parents who gave us these values. then you will not see some people, the way they dress on social media, and somebody will say, oh, please help me thank my mother for training me not to be like this. So the social media space is a space that we really need to know how to control, to be able to build on the dreams of our heroes past and how to build a nation. The thing is, Nigeria is not Europe. Nigeria is not America. Absolutely. They have their own values and they have their own cultures. We have our own values and our own culture. Let people put on their thinking cap and say, why is it that these developed countries are beginning to look onto Africa? They're beginning to look onto Africa for their values reorientation. Looking at what are those things that held us. Our culture is number one. Our values are another thing. So in re-strategizing, we cannot say, for instance, the money that we use for the European Union brings is taxpayers' money of the Europeans.
Yes.
The money that USAID brings is taxpayers' money of US. What stops Nigeria from putting such a fund together and giving to Nigerians to say, this is what we want. Let us develop our agenda. Let us do this. Let us do this, because at the end of the day, you report to whoever has given you money, and the more you report, the more they get to know about your culture, the weakness about this. And like I tell my colleagues, I was on the international board of the EITI for 6 years representing Africa, and I had opportunity to work with civil society activists and actors from different climes around the world. And I came to the conclusion that the African civil society actor is that person that works on issues that affect them directly. It is not about career. But over 80% of our colleagues from the global north, it's about career.
It's a job.
So let's take it like this. Somebody gets a job and the terms of reference is write the best things about Nigeria for the next 3 years. And the person will give you a wonderful, in fact, the person will come here, do internship for 3 months and gets back and they call the person a Nigerian expert. You have been living here in Nigeria. You were born into these issues. You have lived there for 40 years, 50 years. You can never be described as an expert. But that person who came here to spend 3 years, you tutor the person, you took the person around, the person becomes a Nigerian expert who has to vet what you are saying before it can even go. The person is on that job for 3 years and is promoted. The next time the person is looking for another job that says, give me the worst stories out of Nigeria, and the person will deliver. It's about career, it's not about development. So when we get these resources to do what we do it because this is what we need to do for our country. That gap, Nigeria has to fill it. Nigeria must find a way to fill it. There's nothing wrong with Nigeria setting up a Nigerian fund, like you have the UK fund, you have the USAID and all of that. There should be a Nigerian fund. Yes. We are big enough to do that. But you know why we won't do that? Corruption won't allow us.
Yeah, I'm glad I love everything you just said. I'm glad you touched on corruption and values. The values are really eroding, and it's alarming, especially among young children. People do not appreciate culture, they don't respect culture, they glorify wealth over integrity and honesty. But at what point would you say we lost it? At what point would you say this is where we lost it?
So we lost it at that point when we felt that our culture and tradition did not matter. We started glorifying democracy in quotes, actors who were put into office, who now assumed onto themselves community leadership. Because you become a politically exposed person, you have been elected by your people or selected, as it used to be in those days, into a position, you automatically become the leader of the people. So it is you, because you now have resources, you have power, you determine what is happening. The second place where we left it was when the traditional rulers decided, or the system decided to bring traditional rulers under our governance system, such that they now get paid. So you have a governor in a state who feels that I don't like the attitude of this traditional ruler, I don't like what he's saying, dethrones that traditional ruler, and that traditional ruler is supposed to hold you accountable because you are his or her subject. So you lose the power. As traditional rulers are happy to say, oh, government is paying me, government is giving them houses. You go out to do needs assessment. You go out to do needs assessment. What are your issues? Do you know that the priority issue is build a palace? So when you have that, you put yourself under my power. I decide to do what you have to do. We are a traditional country. We have values, and some of these values are tied to our traditional institutions. Because if you are able to have a traditional ruler that is not tied to the apron string of a government that you say is not delivering, that traditional ruler, and also the religious circle too, is able to hold that person accountable, that your traditional ruler summons you home because you have done something. In those days, you will, yes. But now, your traditional ruler summons you home. He's not summoning you home to come and tell you that what you have done is wrong. He goes and says, that car that you promised me that time, you have not brought it for me. You remember that my son is there, he doesn't have a job. And his friend say, no, but I want to see that the poorest of the poor in this community. He say, no, please. You see this, my roof is leaking now. You need to come and put it right. The school in that community, the roof is leaking, like he said. There's no motorable road to even to access that school that same person attended. That same school in that village where that person attended, the person cannot even access it, and it doesn't matter. So the traditional ruler is not able to call them, and that's where I think that we lost it. We need to go back.
All right, the studio is becoming warmed from the vibrancy of the ideas that seem to be permeating the room. You want to test the temperature, but to cool the temperature a bit, I'm not sure whether it's cooling or taking it to another dimension. We have Sagir standing by. I understand Sagir is not ready. We'll continue, but as soon as he's ready, we'll bring you Sagir, who is standing by, and now have updates from the developments of the protest in the streets of Abuja. Some of those footages now are done your screen. We would be able to speak to him shortly to bring us up to speed with what is happening on the streets of Abuja. Doctor, coming to you, you listened to a number of the issues that were raised by Faith with regards to the loss in value, which has also impacted on the credibility of that civil engagement space, which the government now explore to say, we cannot trust you or listen to you because you have this merit of issues. How can we begin to take it back? Because, of course, no society develops without the civil society space truly living up to the ideals,
yes.
You know, and holding government properly accountable, because that is the space that gives us a sense of a corporate outlook in the pursuit of a goal, especially especially when it comes to engaging government and all of that. How can we? Is this something we have to go back and think of rebranding, or a new generation of players in that space would have to come up and then take over these ones? What do we do to that space really? Because the dimensions are getting very dangerous. Today the government engaged in, it took us 3 weeks to even understand how much is the price of a liter of petrol. It was some business mogul saying something different, the government corporation saying another thing. In one day you get 3 messages and you are not sure what it is. How can we take over this space and get people who speak truly for the people?
First of all, before I address that, I would like us to go back to that World Bank and IMF that you mentioned, because Madam was saying earlier that the government has taken a third loan, 1.5 billion US dollars. But before she said that, she had said that in 1993 they were protesting against SAP and they were in the streets, right? You know, protesting against SAP. Who protests against World Bank nowadays? Who protests against IMF loans nowadays? And why not? The reason is because the World Bank and the IMF and other institutions like that, they have come to understand our society better and exploited the fault lines within this society even more effectively. Because before, in 1993, in the late 80s and early 90s, as she had mentioned, some of the most vociferous criticisms against the World Bank and IMF the world over came from Nigeria here.
Doctor, I would like you to hold your thoughts. I will come back to you. I understand that Sagir is now on standby. Good morning, Sagir.
Yes, good morning, Sunday, and happy independence to everyone in the studio and, of course, by extension to Nigerians.
Thank you very much, Sagir, and I hope that you are staying safe. Can you please bring us to speed with what's happening in the streets of Abuja?
Okay, I think it's good to start that, first of all, we are supposed to see what should be a sequel of the End Bad Governance demonstration that started on the 1st of August through to the 10th of August. So the protest organizers had, on different fora, including social media, maintained that the 1st of October is going to be sort of a continuation of that protest as a spin-off from the 1st of August up until the 10th. Interestingly, some part of course, the city center, particularly the three-armed zone, from the videos that we had sent, you could see that there was a heavy presence of, security personnel and operatives across different security agencies. Talk about the Civil Defense Corps, talk about the Nigerian police, talk about, the Nigerian army, including road safety officials and even VIO officials as well, strategically positioned, across different parts of the city, specifically places that lead into the three-armed zone. We have also gotten chatter, of course, that this is replicated across the entry points of Abuja. I saw by myself when I was coming into the city early this morning the presence, of soldiers along the Kubwa Expressway into the city. Some other colleagues had also mentioned that the situation is similar, in the Nyanya Maraba axis as well. Then talk about activities of the End Bad Governance protest, key of which one of the sponsors, of course, Omoyele Show, is one of those who have been very vocal, I mean to say, about the demonstration. I posted on his social media account that there would sort of be a continuation of the demonstration. But interestingly, we've not seen any of such activities as we're currently even at the Moshood Abiola stadium, and still there's been no activity so far, across the length and breadth of the city that we've covered. Okay,
just before we let you go, can you give us a sense of what's happening? Is it that people are converging at these centers, and from your snooping around, do you get a sense that we are likely to see some kind of march away from that venue, approaching the city center, later in the day?
Sandy, from what I've observed, I think that I would say the placement of the security operatives across different parts of the city has made it such that it would be really difficult for, any of such groups or individuals to gather to commence, such demonstration. Earlier in the morning we had heard that, some individuals had gathered around the Utako area, but before we got to the vicinity, we also got wind of information that they had been dispersed, by security operatives. So converging in groups to demonstrate, it's going to be very, very unlikely from the arrangements and the placement strategically of security operatives across different parts of the city.
Thank you very much, Sagir, and please stay safe as you move around. You've got to be alive to bring us those updates. We will circle back to you in the course of the program to get updates from other parts of the city.
Surely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sagir. All right, Doctor.
Thank you. So again, at that time, people would almost on a very regular basis, people will publish research, produce research, publish news stories, commentary, analysis on a regular basis about the dangers of those loans, about even the dangers of the ideas that were being sold, privatization, this and that. They weren't always right, some of these criticisms themselves, but they were vigorous and people were, regular. So the society as a whole was kept abreast of what was happening with government. But if you look at it, particularly since the 8 years of the Buhari government and now this Tinubu government, it is literally World Bank, IMF policies that have been determining government policy in Nigeria, almost 100%. It is as if the World Bank and the IMF have not said, go ahead with something, Nigerian government will not feel comfortable doing it. Even this subsidy that we are talking about, even the flotation of the Naira, the devaluation of the Naira, these two policies that Nigerians are complaining, about. These were World Bank, IMF policies for the past 10 years in this country. Not only were they IMF policies for the past 10 years, the IMF and World Bank were also making effort to sell and market these policies to various sectors of the Nigerian society. They were selling the ideas to newspapers, to media people, to civil society organizations. And again, because as we said earlier, the civil society organizations, look, how many key civil society organizations have you seen criticize the World Bank and IMF in the last 3-4 years in Nigeria? Because you cannot bite the fingers that fits you, because the leading figures And even within the universities, the leading figures that used to do these criticisms, all of them have been bought over indirectly one way or another. You know, consultancies here, consultancies there. So you have a context where all systems of opposition to foreign influence in the country have been weakened, and weakened considerably. So you now have their agenda in ascendance. You know, they do literally what they want. At a time, you and I can remember, at a time when they were selling the fuel, I think, was it 600 or so? And then the IMF released a report that the money should actually be 700 and something. When Nigerians were still trying to recover from the shocks of having to buy it at 500 plus. Now they have, we are here, and we can't see any benefits that they are talking about. Even if this idea of, palliatives, these are words. These are ideas that come from those institutions. You don't govern with palliatives. To govern with palliatives is to disrespect your citizens. And in a country where we are told that how many percent are multidimensionally poor? 80%. Is it 80%? 80 million. Where you have 80 million people, it's 130 million actually.
133
the index, 133 million. So you have 130 million people poor, and you are talking about palliatives. Who are you going to give? Who are you going to live out? You give palliative if you have maybe 5% or 2% or 1% of people who don't have access to certain things. Then these ones can get palliatives. But you are talking about palliatives for 130 million. Even if you remove those 133 million, they will still be the second largest country in Africa. So, and you are saying that you are going to govern all of them with palliatives. Poverty alleviation, all these are terms that came from this World Bank and institutions to just make it easier for Nigerian government to misbehave and get away with it, so long as they tow, because they too are in business. They too, they are not, they are in business.
That's right.
It's not like they are here as charities. They are here to do business, to also improve what they are doing here as well.
True.
So they look for strategies and ways in which, if they can, before they will use aid to force it down on people, but now they sell the idea, and once critical sectors of society buy those ideas, that's it. They get away with everything.
Interesting. Just to put in proper perspective, when you were talking about 130 million, that's palliative for the size of Australia and Canada put together. You can also add Ghana or South Africa. So
thank you very much. Thank you. I like that.
That's what these things mean in reality, other than just putting them in words. We understand that there is a presidential change of guard happening at the forecourt of the presidential villa. I will bring you images from this place, and the show continues. The feedback seemed to be coming in slowly, but these are events that used to adorn the celebration of Independence Day. But as Madam Faith and Dr. Suleiman would remind us, this used to be usually at a popular square where school kids would watch this event go on majestically. These are memories that live with us for a very, very long time, after which the president will have some kind of engagement, and a handshake with most of these persons. But all of this is now packaged for the viewing and the entertainment of the president and members of the presidency, whatever that means these days, and it's conveyed to us essentially via broadcast like this.
All right. The pride and the joy when it comes to wanting to put on, I always tell my kids, I say, you have the opportunity of putting on your white canvas and your white socks, and then the excitement of wanting to be the person at the forefront, and the governor will wave at you, or smile at you, and the handshake. All those were things we're all looking forward to back then. And then you come back home, and probably your mom will be in the good mood to prepare some nice rice and stew for you that day. But nowadays, nobody even has the time to look at your face.
Yeah.
It's more like Nigerians are preoccupied getting by than celebrating the day.
Yeah, and then of course, let me just chip in to say that the president plans to confer national honors to the Senate President, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, and I think the Speaker of House of Reps.
Which is very dangerous, frankly. I will not let you finish that one before I intervene, sorry. Yeah. Because Lilian started a very important issue that I think maybe we could do well to dwell on it a little more, which is why do we have low-key and lackluster Independence Day celebrations? That's an important question, because all of us can remember at a time when independence celebrations were much more active, much more vigorous, much wholly engaging and involved. A lot of Nigerians were involved in it. It is because the state has been disengaging from the people's lives, disengaging from the people's lives. And one way in which that happens is what you just mentioned now, that the Senate President and the Chief Justice of the Federation will be given national awards, probably GCON, because that's the highest that they can get, only the President gets GCFR. So that is not right, in my opinion. The fact that, two things. One, if a Nigerian president is being sworn in, usually they are given the GCFR there and then, and the vice president is given the GCON there and then. That's wrong. The motivation to recognition comes after effort, not before it. Recognition should come after people have served their country and there is some, at least even partial agreement, consensus within Nigerians or among Nigerians that this person has done well. Then you can give them the GCFR. It should not be automatic. The fact that somebody comes to office by itself does not mean that they should earn or they have automatically earned the highest honor that the country has to give. That's one. Second, this idea of giving the Senate President as well as the Chief Justice of Nigeria, in my opinion, for a president in his first term, is entirely dangerous. Dangerous because these are the two institutions within the government that can hold the power of the executive in check. Now you have the courts, represented, at the peak of which is the Chief Justice of Nigeria. And then you have the National Legislature at the top of which is what?
The Chairman of the National Assembly.
So, and these are the people now being honored. There are many ways in which to seduce people into doing nothing. To seduce people into not taking action where they are supposed to take. Sometimes you do so by flattery. You don't have to use force. So somebody has just come to office as CJN. They have not done any groundbreaking work while there, and you are giving them
the highest honor.
The highest honor there is to give that they can earn, and there is election coming on just around the corner. I'm not sure that that's a good thing. It may not be what the president intended, but as far as I'm concerned, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And we can reconfigure those things and agree that no matter how well you work as CJN, you shouldn't earn this award until when you are leaving. Or even after you have left. We can agree as a society and do this. That no matter what you do as Senate President, and I'm still looking for what the Senate President has done in the past 16 months. Maybe you people in the media will tell me. But what for? We can say, wait until after you have served your term and there is general agreement that you have distinguished yourself in office, in service, and then we can say, okay, come, let's give you an award. And then it becomes a kind of example for other people, for you and I, to want to emulate, to follow. But as it is now, it means that you cannot get it no matter what you do provided you haven't risen to these offices, and so on.
Okay.
So I'm not really comfortable with it.
Sorry, can I just say something around the World Bank loans, because this should be an opportunity to also enlighten Nigerians. In 2014, I was privileged to facilitate the meeting of global civil society with the heads of the IMF and the World Bank in Washington, D.C.
As part of that meeting?
Yes, I was the facilitator, the moderator of that particular meeting. So what I found out was that civil society has not, especially the civil society from Africa. If you look at civil society from Latin America, Southern America, their engagement with these institutions is very robust because of the vibrancy of the civil society and of the issues that are there. They are almost like the African civil society actors, but we are not as vibrant as they are in Latin America. So for instance, 2 months ago, there was a loan that Nigeria collected. And there was this meeting that was convened of civil society actors, because we're asking, why were you giving this loan to Nigeria? There were supposed to be certain steps you would have taken, and the same thing at the state levels. Before you take a loan, you're supposed to engage the people so that these monies you are collecting, you are using it. You're not taking loans for consumption, but you're taking loans to help you build things that can repay those loans. And we're asking, why would the World Bank decide to give Nigeria this loan when the other loan they gave, they didn't utilize it properly? And that's perhaps, maybe that's why you now heard they're using this for health. We are supposed to now go to track which health institutions are they using this for, so that we will become the first whistleblowers when they are not using this. And another, the reason why this is happening is because of the weakness of the National Assembly. Now, what is happening right now is a subtle integration of both the judiciary and the legislature into the executive. So they are not able to play their oversight role. And I keep saying that if we have a strong legislature, even both at the local government level, at state level, and at national level, some of these loans and some of these things that we see happening would not really happen. If only, for instance, yesterday I saw the House of Representatives calling the young man that blew the whistle on all of those to a committee for him to. I wish they can call heads of agencies, they can call government when people say this has happened. We are talking about this money. Nati just released a report to say that Nigeria is being owed over $6 billion. And they have not done, they have not convened a meeting to say, who are these people that are owing Nigeria $6 billion? Why is it that the NNPC that we have and all of that, and they're concerned about the report about a citizen that the correctional center, well, I'm happy that they did that, but I think that there are other issues that the National Assembly should quickly convey such meetings to hold government accountable. And when we have that, I'm sure Nigerians will be able, for instance, even bringing the World Bank people to say, this loan that you are giving to Nigeria, what was the process? Yes. What was the process? What are the conditions for this loan? Those people who are collecting it, the National Assembly should sit on those loans and approve it before they are given. But we don't see that.
Yeah, we don't see that. And that brings down to transparency on the part of the government. Nigerians have always complained that the government is not being transparent enough with us. But are Nigerians willing to follow it duly and get this information from the government, or where necessary, or it's just the government being shady on giving the information out?
Unfortunately, what has happened to us is that we have allowed tribalism and nepotism to take over the whole idea of being Nigerian. I know that I am first the Ukwane woman that I am from Delta State before I became a Nigerian, but coming to this space, you understand that if Nigeria doesn't work, my tribe, my Ukwane will not work. It will affect us. So you have this, you see people on the forefront saying this must be done. As soon as somebody, their kinsman or woman, gets into the place, it is ice water. And then they go back to say, oh, they didn't start it. They begin to even give you reasons to justify what that person is doing, that thing that the person is doing. Until we remove that toga of tribalism and nepotism out of us and look at the things that brought you, talked about the three leaders that we had, the picture behind you, those ideas that they have to talk about the Nigeria as a collective instead of Nigeria separated, then we can begin to ask those questions. Because at the end of the day, what do you see? Now, somebody is even espousing the fact that, oh, you know why it is good to do rotation, especially at the state. If the person decides to be in 8 years, transforms his or her village to a city, that is fine. Another person will come, transform his or her village. If you talk of 16 years or 24 years, you will see that you now have 3 or 4 villages turned to cities. You can imagine that.
Do you see that changing? Because we've spoken about the young generation that are coming up. Unfortunately, go to social media, you still see fights on tribe, and this is my village and my governor and my...
It's getting worse.
Do you see that? Would it change?
People should, and you know, it pains me when I hear young people. Let me tell you what happened in my house this morning. Before I started coming, I asked my daughter, I said, what are we going to eat this morning? Today is Independence. Mommy, I'm not happy. We're not doing any Independence food today. There's nothing to celebrate. She's 19. I was shocked, even though I laughed. After a while, I sat down, I was shocked. Because at 19, I wasn't thinking like that. I was, by this time, I was dressing up to go out.
Yes.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So, the fact that we have reached that level, we need to do another reorientation. Unfortunately, National Orientation Agency is not helping us. The leaders who are supposed to be the mentors are not helping us. The traditional institution is not helping us. The religious institution is not helping us. You saw the other day in a church, I can't remember where the leader of the church went to bend down to the politician.
To come to the front, sir.
When you are supposed to be... I remember growing up, I was in church one day. The Speaker of the House of Assembly for that particular state came late to a meeting. To a church service. There was a Thanksgiving that was happening, and we were in church. And the aides of that person came to say, oh, they should create seats for the person to come and sit down. The Reverend Father said, no, it can't happen. He should stay outside there. Mass is 9 a.m. He should have been here by 9:55 a.m. if he wants to sit in the front. We had people like that. But these days, what will happen? You will suspend the mass, allow him and his entourage to come and disrupt everything.
Interesting. All right. As we begin to wind down, Dr. Suleiman, with everything that we have said, does it completely look hopeless?
Thank you.
If there are hopes at all, how effective are these strings? Can we lash onto them and begin to build something new?
Thank you very much. Even before you mentioned that, I was thinking of it, that the entire conversation is taken on kind of maybe there is no way out. That's not the impression we aim to create today. And we believe that even though there is a lot to complain about, there's still been quite a good many things that have happened to Nigeria in the past few years. I will give you an example. In 1999 or 1998, if you wanted to go to university anywhere in Nigeria, there were only maybe 37 or 20
options available.
This is maybe roughly 30 universities that were available for you to go. And the whole country, or particularly the 19 states of northern Nigeria, there were just maybe about 12, universities as a whole. Today, you have, several cities. Many cities in Nigeria have several universities, even within them. Abuja here, probably 10. And so on. Kano, a similar number. Lagos, maybe twice that number, and so on. What that has done is that it has opened up, access and opportunities for people to obtain education. You can complain about the quality, whether the quality has also fallen, but at least you can say that access has improved. That's one. Also, I believe, even though people say that the middle class has been emasculated, there is no longer a middle class, I don't believe that. I think that there has actually been an expansion of the middle class in Nigeria, and which has been sustained, particularly in the services, in the last 10, 15, 20 years in this country. Because I remember vividly, you could tell those who were in the middle class when I was growing up, they were like there was something special about them, and so on. They will have plenty education. They will be working in big organizations and so on and so on. There are lots of people working in civil society organizations now who are doing quite well. Lots of people working in private sector organizations. You don't have to work for CBN or NNPCOs, whatever, to belong to me. You can work for Daily Trust and be fine, like you and Lilian and several others. So I believe very strongly that the middle class in the country has actually expanded, and so on. What has been missing is the mobilization, the platform with which people can actually join hands and work together about common interest or common issues. For example, recently we were talking about the voter apathy, which comes down to what you were discussing with the social media people. I said the people who complain the most about elections in Nigeria are also those who don't participate in it. The middle class are the ones who talk the most about elections. They are the ones on Twitter, on Facebook, talking about elections. The election is rubbish, the election is that, the election is that. But they never vote. They never vote because they cannot endure the inconveniences associated with voting in the Nigerian context. They cannot go and line up and spend 2 hours, 3 hours, with people that they don't like, the lower level ones, and so on. They cannot go there and stay there, But if you have maybe a booth near them, like in Abuja here, where you have polling booths, but in most other towns, people are not, you don't have a lit segmented or segregated in particular suburbs or like in other places. Even if you go to Cuba, for example, both the middle class and who's not middle class will vote in the same place, and so on. So, and that's how it is throughout the country. So these people do not participate actively enough in this process, and they have to rediscover their historical responsibility. That everywhere country that has changed, it has changed because the middle class made it change. The middle class changes because they know they are closer to the upper class, so they understand the ways of the upper class, and the upper class cannot get to the lower class until they pass through the middle class. At the same time, they are the ones also close to the lower class as well. So the ideas, the practices of the middle class are very crucial for Nigeria, which is why I have been very happy about the obedient movement. Not 100% happy because there are other things I would like them to do, do you understand? But the fact that they have been able to coalesce into a movement itself, do you understand? Because that's the middle class I'm talking about, is something. And they have an agenda, and they have ways of following through with the agenda. Not all the ways that you will agree with, do you understand the point? But I'm speaking as a social scientist. You still find that the energy, the vibrancy, the stability. No, I don't want to use the term stability. I mean, the energy levels have not fallen long after the elections. You understand? And you need things like that to put pressure on the system to change. Maybe if they can find a way to nationalize their appeal. Do you understand the point I'm making? Bring other middle classes from other sections on board. Speak to more nationalist impulses in the country, because these are there. It's easy actually to find the things that bind Nigerians, than the things that even
talking about the things
so
that
that's one way out.
Thank you. Talking about the things that binds Nigerian in rounding up, how crucial is the issues around symbolism, some of the things we are taking out of this celebration in binding us together. The schools, it was public holidays because the schools have to send representatives to march past. It was public holidays because there were other social engagements that would disrupt education delivery as we used to know it. How crucial is it that we get back to those days where we find opportunities that unite us, and we do things that appeal to all of us as members of a single nation, rather than just sit in our silos and complain about the things that don't work.
Yeah, it's very, very crucial. For me, it should be our topmost priority, because in those days, you have celebrations from communities to national level. For instance, this celebration would have been held at the National Stadium, where you have people, and within town halls, going, there's activity everywhere, every nook and cranny of the country. That's one thing that should unite us, the fact that we are Nigerians, we are proud. You go out of this country, anywhere you go to, as soon as they recognize you are Nigerian, they recognize you first because of your resilience and the quality that you bring to their society. But again, there's also a negative part of that. We need to work together to revive, that Nigerianness of every one of us, and then reduce the negative stories that we have. Then the second thing is about looking beyond our tribes, our brothers and our sisters. They're looking together for us as Nigerians to build a Nigeria that will work for everybody. It's important that we do that.
Thank you. And I like how you ended it on that passionate note of building a Nigeria that work for us. We have been talking in the studio to Nwadishi Faith, that I'm sure most of you are very familiar with. She's the Executive Director of the Center for Transparency Advocacy. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Always.
Thank you.
And to my boss, who has decided to test the waters on the other side of the river. In this profession, we have boss for life. I'm not sure what to say about former. All right. He's a political scientist, engages very actively with politics, policy, and public affairs. He's the CEO and Managing Director of the Pyramid Political Insights, Dr. Suleiman. It's a pleasure to have you back home.
Thank you.
And I can assure you that the doors will be open always.
To have me here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. Thank
All
you
right.
as well.
It's been a wonderful segment. Remember, it's just one of the several segments that we have lined up for this special occasion of the 61st anniversary of Nigeria. This program continues after this time out. I am Sunday Micheal Ogo.
And I am Lilian Ogazi. Thank you so much for staying with us. Well, let's not forget, like our guest said, let's be a good Nigerian. Let's try and inform our children on the right and the good things about Nigeria. I was opportune to attend an Independence Day celebration in a school yesterday, and it was beautiful. It was lovely to see that children still believe in this country. So please let us try and give them positive information about the country and keep educating them. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. All right, thank you for joining us.